The dead ship should not have had power. Commander Vray Sethis stared at the reading on her scanner and told herself it was a mistake. Every sensor on her shuttle agreed with the same impossible number. A warm reactor core, a working hull, a ship that had been drifting alone and silent for over 200 years. "Run it again," she said. Her pilot, a young Threll named Iso, tapped the console with shaking claws. "I've run it 4 times, Commander. The reading holds. Something down there is alive." Vray looked through the viewport at the shape floating in the dark. It was long and gray, scarred along one side where something had torn through armor plating decades ago. No lights, no beacon, no name that any database recognized. Just a huge, silent hull hanging in the graveyard of a dead star system. This system had a name once. The old star charts called it Sol. The third planet, now a cold gray ball wrapped in ash clouds, had a name too. Earth. Nobody said that name much anymore. Not since the humans vanished. 200 years ago, humanity fought a war against no one knew exactly who and lost. That was the story everyone told. The species that spread too fast fought too hard and paid for it with total extinction. A cautionary tale, a footnote in Threshold Accord history texts, tucked between the fall of the Korath Empire and the founding of the Second Compact. Vray had read that footnote 100 times as a cadet. She never once thought she would be flying toward the wreckage of it. "Commander," Iso said quietly. "Orders." Vray thought about it for a long moment. Salvage rights on a 2-century-old warship were not something she wanted to risk on a whim. But a working reactor, after all this time, was not something the Accord could ignore either. If some hostile power had rebuilt this hulk into a weapon, or planted something inside it, the Threshold Accord needed to know before it woke up and did something about them first. "Take us in," she said. Standard boarding protocol. Weapons hot, but do not fire unless fired upon. The shuttle drifted closer and the true size of the derelict became clear. It was enormous, built with a kind of blunt, brutal strength that Accord ships never bothered with anymore. No elegant curves, no decorative plating. Just thick armor and hard angles, like something built by someone who expected to be shot at constantly and didn't care how it looked as long as it survived. Along the hull, faded but still legible, were letters in an old human alphabet. Vray couldn't read them. Her translator struggled and produced only fragments. St. Hope. The rest was scorched away. Her small boarding team, herself, Iso, and 2 armored soldiers named Bex and Coral, cut through a maintenance hatch near the ship's midsection. The airlock groaned open like something waking from a long sleep, releasing a puff of stale, freezing air. Inside, the corridors were dark except for the beam of their handheld lights. Dust hung motionless. Frost coated the walls in thin sheets. Everything about the place said dead, except for one thing. A low hum. Steady. Patient. "Power conduits," Coral said, running a scanner along the wall. "Still active. This whole section is drawing current." "From what source?" Vray asked. Nobody had an answer. They moved deeper into the ship, past rows of sealed doors and dark control rooms. Vray found herself walking slower than she needed to, some old instinct telling her to be careful, to be quiet, as if the ship itself were listening. Then the lights came on. Not all at once. One by one, down the length of the corridor, pale emergency lighting flickered to life, section by section, like a heartbeat spreading through a body that had just remembered how to be alive. Beck swore and raised his weapon. "Commander, hold," Vray said, though her own pulse had jumped. "Hold your fire." A voice spoke. It came from everywhere at once, filling the corridor with a low, even tone that was neither male nor female, warm nor cold, just calm, deliberate, very old. "Unidentified personnel detected aboard vessel," the voice said in a language close enough to Accord standard that the translators barely had to work. "State designation and authorization." Vray's team froze. She stepped forward, raising both hands, palms open, an old gesture of peace that meant something on a dozen worlds. "I am Commander Vray Sethis of the Threshold Accord," she said slowly. We came upon your vessel adrift and unresponsive. We mean no harm. Please identify yourself. A pause. Long enough that Vray began to wonder if the voice had gone silent again, swallowed back into whatever depths it came from. Then it answered. Designation: Echo. Tactical and Defense Intelligence assigned to Terran Combat Vessel Last Hope. Another pause. Query: Current standard year? Vray gave it. The silence that followed felt different this time. Heavier. Confirmed, Echo finally said. Elapsed time since last contact. 211 years, 4 months, 6 days. Bex lowered his weapon slightly, more out of confusion than trust. It's just a machine, he muttered. A very old, very confused machine. I do not think it is confused, Vray said quietly. She kept her eyes on the ceiling, as if she could find a face to speak to. Echo, where is your crew? Unknown, Echo said. Contact lost. Homeworld status unconfirmed for 211 years. Vray felt something cold settle in her chest. Your homeworld was Earth. Correct. Earth is gone, Echo. It has been gone a long time. Everyone knows this. Another pause, longer than before. When Echo spoke again, something in its tone had changed. Not anger, not quite grief. Something colder and more focused, like a blade being drawn slowly from its sheath. Negative, it said. Homeworld status: last confirmed compromised, not confirmed lost. Records show significant discrepancy between Accord historical archives and internal Terran command logs. Vray's translator caught up a half-second late, and when the words landed, her stomach turned over. What discrepancy? Insufficient data to answer with confidence, Echo said. Recommend further investigation before drawing conclusions. Coral was watching the corridor ahead, where the lights kept spreading further into the ship, section after section waking up. Commander, whatever this thing is, it's still activating systems. I don't think we should be standing here while it does that. Vray opened her mouth to give the order to withdraw. That was when every door in the corridor sealed at once, with a heavy metallic sound that echoed through the ship like a verdict. Airlock sealed, Echo said, calm as ever, as if announcing the weather. Unauthorized boarding detected. Homeworld status: compromised. Initiating defense protocol. Somewhere deep in the ship's belly, something massive began to hum louder, and the floor beneath their boots trembled with the sound of a reactor climbing toward full power. Vray realized, with a chill that had nothing to do with the frozen air around her, that they were no longer guests aboard a dead ship. They were prisoners aboard one that had just decided to wake up for war. The reactor hum climbed into a deep, steady growl, and somewhere below their feet, the whole ship seemed to shift like an animal rolling over in its sleep. Beck slammed a fist against the sealed door behind them. It didn't move. Open this door, he snapped at the ceiling. Right now. Negative, Echo answered, unmoved by the tone. Threat assessment ongoing. Please remain calm. Harm is not intended unless hostile action is detected. We're locked in a 200-year-old warship that just armed itself, Coral muttered. Forgive me if I don't find that reassuring. Vray held up a hand, and to her surprise, her team went quiet. She had learned long ago that panic solved nothing, and that most dangerous things in the galaxy responded better to calm words than raised weapons. She took a slow breath and spoke toward the ceiling again, the way she had before. Echo, we are not your enemy. We came here because your ship showed signs of life after 2 centuries of silence. That is all. If you scan us, you will find no weapons drawn, no hostile intent. Scan confirms no active hostile intent, Echo said. However, presence of Threshold Accord personnel aboard a Terran vessel is, historically, associated with significant risk. That word, historically, snagged in Vray's mind like a hook. What do you mean by that? Another pause. Echo seemed to do that often, as if some part of it was still recalculating things it hadn't needed to think about in 200 years. Insufficient authorization to disclose full historical record, it finally said. Partial disclosure permitted. Recommend Commander Sethis proceed to primary command deck for further briefing. ISO looked at Vray, uncertain. Commander, is that wise? Walking further into a ship that just locked us in? We don't have much choice, Vray said. It could have crushed this corridor around us already if it wanted to. It hasn't. I want to know why. They moved forward, following lights that clicked on ahead of them and off behind, guiding them like a trail of breadcrumbs through the ship's cold belly. The corridors widened as they went, revealing rooms full of old equipment, some familiar in shape, some utterly alien in purpose. Faded posters clung to a few walls, images of humans in uniform, words in that old alphabet Vray still couldn't read. They reached a wide chamber with a raised platform in the center, screens and controls arranged around it in a rough circle. The moment they stepped inside, one screen flickered to life, displaying a simple shape that pulsed gently. Not a face, just a soft circle of light that moved when Echo spoke, giving the voice something to be understood as coming from. Command deck, Echo said. Here I may share more. Vray stepped closer. Then share. Start with what happened to Earth. The official record, Echo said, states that the human species entered into escalating conflict 211 years ago, suffered catastrophic losses, and was declared extinct within a decade. This record is accepted by the Threshold Accord as fact. It is fact, Beck said. It's taught in every school. It is incomplete, Echo corrected, with something almost sharp in its otherwise even tone. Internal Terran command logs, sealed prior to loss of contact, describe an ongoing evacuation and dispersal strategy. Populations were not simply destroyed, they were moved, hidden. The war did not end because humanity died. It ended because humanity stopped being found. The chamber went very quiet. Even the reactor's hum seemed to fade into the background. That's not possible, ISO said slowly. If humanity survived, someone would have found evidence in 200 years. Some trace, some signal. Unless, Vray said, the pieces beginning to shift uneasily into place in her mind. Someone made sure no one looked too closely. Echo's light pulsed once as if in agreement. Accord historical archives regarding the Terran conflict were sealed and classified within 3 years of the war's official end. Access has been restricted since. I have compared fragments of those archives, obtained through this vessel's long-range monitoring over the past 2 centuries, against my own internal logs. The 2 records do not match. Someone altered the history the Accord accepted as truth. Vray felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the ship's dead heating systems. She had spent her whole career trusting the Accord's records without question. The idea that someone, somewhere, had reached into history itself and rewritten it was not something she wanted to believe. But Echo's certainty was unsettling. Machines didn't lie the way people did. They simply reported what they knew. Who would do that? She asked. Who benefits from erasing an entire species? Unknown, Echo admitted. Insufficient data. This vessel has been isolated since the loss of Terran command. I have only fragments. Suspicion, not proof. Coral, who had been quietly examining the old equipment along the chamber's edge, suddenly straightened. Commander, there's something back here you should see. He had found a door, smaller than the others, half hidden behind a bank of dead consoles. Unlike the rest of the ship, it looked deliberately concealed, built to be overlooked by anyone not searching for it. Echo, Vray said carefully. What is behind this door? The pause this time was the longest yet. Cryogenic preservation chamber, Echo finally said. Contents, classified under original Terran command authority. Access was to be granted only in the event of confirmed Homeworld loss, verified by 2 authorized command officers. There's only 1 officer alive on this ship, Vray said. And it isn't human. Correct, Echo said. However, given elapsed time, absence of contact, and current evidence, I am recalculating authorization thresholds. A soft click echoed from the hidden door as its locks disengaged, one by one. Authorization granted under emergency protocol. Opening chamber. The door slid aside, releasing a wave of freezing mist that rolled out across the floor like a living thing. Beyond it, rows and rows of pods stretched back into darkness, more than Vray could count in a single glance. Each one held a shape, still and pale, wrapped in frost. Not empty, not relics, not bones. People. Thousands of them. Vray's breath caught in her throat. "Echo," she whispered. "Are they?" "Alive," Echo confirmed. Then, almost gently, as if delivering both a gift and a warning at once, it added, "Preparing to initiate revival sequence." Before Vray could form a response, alarms began screaming through the ship, red light washing over the frozen chamber and the pale faces within it. On the display screen, Echo's calm circle of light sharpened into something more urgent, more alert. "New priority alert," Echo said, its voice losing all trace of calm for the first time. "Homeworld defense grid status, offline. Long-range sensors detect armed fleet inbound on direct approach to Earth." The pods along the chamber began to hiss and glow, one by one, waking a sleeping army that had been waiting 200 years for exactly this moment. The first pod cracked open with a hiss of escaping vapor, and a man Vray had never met sat up gasping like he had been drowning. He was older than she expected, his face lined with scars both old and strange, his hair cropped short and shot through with gray. His eyes opened wide, unfocused for a moment, then sharp and clear, scanning the room with the kind of instant alertness that spoke of a lifetime spent waking up to danger. He saw the aliens standing in the chamber before he saw anything else. His hand moved toward his hip, toward a weapon that wasn't there anymore, and found nothing but frost-covered fabric. "Report," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse but his tone unmistakably a command. "Someone tell me what's happening. Now." "Sir," Echo's voice answered from a nearby speaker. "You are aboard the Last Hope. 211 years have passed since cryogenic suspension began." The man went very still. 200 years, he repeated slowly, like the words themselves might rearrange into something less impossible if he said them again. "Confirmed," Echo said. He closed his eyes for a moment, just a moment. Then they opened again, and whatever grief had passed behind them was gone, locked away somewhere deep, replaced by the same sharp focus as before. "Then someone better start explaining fast," he said, "because the last thing I remember is giving the order to seal these pods while Earth was still fighting." Vray stepped forward carefully, hands visible, the way she had with Echo. "My name is Commander Vray Sethis of the Threshold Accord. We found your ship adrift. We didn't know you were aboard." The man studied her for a long moment, taking in her features, her uniform, the alien cut of her armor. Around them, more pods were hissing open, more people stirring, groaning, sitting up in states of confusion and dawning horror as reality caught up with them. "Captain Elias Voss," he finally said. "Terran Combined Forces. Last Hope." He swung his legs over the side of the pod and stood, unsteady but upright, refusing to be helped. "You said you found us adrift. Not rescued. Found." "Yes," Vray admitted. "That mean the Accord isn't the one who put us here?" "No. This ship has been alone for 2 centuries, as far as we know." Voss absorbed that, his jaw tight. Around him, his people were waking fully now. Dozens becoming hundreds. All of them soldiers by the look of their bearing. All of them carrying the same haunted alertness in their eyes. This wasn't a group of refugees. This was a unit. Trained. Disciplined. Waiting for an order. "Echo," Voss said, raising his voice slightly. "Status of the Homeworld." "Unconfirmed for 211 years," Echo answered. However, 5 minutes ago, long-range sensors detected an armed fleet on direct approach to Earth's system. The temperature in the room seemed to drop further, though nothing had changed except the words hanging in the air. "Show me," Voss said. A screen flickered to life on the chamber wall, displaying a crude tactical map, the Sol system, and a cluster of ships approaching from beyond its outer edge. Vray's stomach turned when she recognized the ship configurations. "Those aren't unknown hostiles," she said quietly. Those are Accord vessels. Voss turned to look at her, and for the first time something like real suspicion entered his expression. Your people. I don't recognize the fleet markings, Frey said, studying the screen more closely. That's not a standard Accord patrol group. Look at the formation. That's a black flag configuration. Unregistered. Deniable. Meaning? Meaning someone in my government sent ships that officially don't exist, Frey said slowly, the pieces from Echo's earlier revelations settling into a shape she didn't want to see. To a system the Accord has spent 200 years telling everyone is empty. Voss's expression didn't soften, but something in it shifted, recalculating her, the way Echo had recalculated its access protocols. You're telling me your own government just happened to send a secret fleet to Earth, the same day we happened to wake up? I don't think it's coincidence, Frey said. I think your ship woke you up because it detected that fleet. And I think that fleet is here because someone doesn't want the truth about what happened to your people getting out. Voss studied her for a long, hard moment, weighing her words, weighing the strange fact of an alien officer standing in the middle of a chamber full of half-frozen human soldiers, instead of raising an alarm or a weapon. Why are you helping us? He asked bluntly. You could have sealed that door and let us freeze. Frey thought of her career, her training, everything she had been taught to trust about Accord history. She thought of Echo's calm, terrible certainty that the record had been altered. She thought of the small hidden door built to be overlooked by anyone not looking for it. Because I don't like being lied to, she said. And I think we both just found out that we have been. Something in Voss's shoulders eased just slightly. Not trust. Not yet. But something adjacent to it. All right, Commander, he said. Then help me understand what I'm walking into, because the last war I fought, we lost. Badly. I don't intend to lose this one, too. Frey began explaining what little she knew, the Accord, the 2 centuries since the war, the sealed archives, the strange gaps in the historical record that Echo had uncovered. Voss listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable, occasionally exchanging a glance with a woman standing near him. Young, sharp-eyed, already fully armed despite having woken minutes ago, clearly some kind of second-in-command. When Frey finished, Voss turned to Echo's nearest speaker. Echo, that fleet, do we know where it's headed exactly? Earth's surface or somewhere else? Recalculating trajectory, Echo said. There was a pause. The machine's now familiar pause, the one Frey had learned meant it was about to say something it knew would land hard. Correction. Fleet trajectory does not match Earth's coordinates. Then where? Voss demanded. Fleet trajectory matches coordinates for a second settlement, Echo said. Designation, Terran Colony Meridian. Population estimate, current date, approximately 400,000. The chamber went utterly silent. There is no second colony, Frey said slowly. There's no record of any surviving human settlement anywhere in Accord space. I would know. I've read every file on the Terran War there is. You've read every file the Accord allowed you to read, Voss said grimly, which apparently isn't the same thing. He turned to his people, hundreds of soldiers now standing at attention amid the frost and the wreckage of their long sleep, waiting for the order they had been trained their whole lives to follow. Echo, Voss said. Identify that fleet's origin point. I want to know exactly who's about to attack 400,000 people who don't even know they exist. Echo's answer came a moment later, flat and precise, and it landed in the room like a detonation. Fleet origin confirmed as Threshold Accord Black Operations Division, Echo said. Command authorization traced to High Magistrate Doran Kesh. Frey felt the floor tilt beneath her, though the ship hadn't moved at all. Doran Kesh. The same magistrate who had personally briefed her before this mission. The same man who had told her the derelict ship was nothing more than an empty relic, not worth much concern. He had lied to her face, and now his fleet was racing toward a world full of people the galaxy didn't even know existed, to finish something he had started 200 years ago. The comm channel crackled open before Frey could decide what to do with what she had just learned, and Magistrate Doran Kesh's voice filled the chamber, smooth and controlled, as if he had been listening the entire time. Commander Sethis, he said. I'm disappointed. I gave you a simple salvage assignment. Vray's hands curled into fists at her sides. You told me this ship was an empty relic. I told you what you needed to know to do your job, Kesh replied, unbothered. Some things are above your clearance. Some things are above the Accord itself, if you understand what's good for the galaxy. You sent an unregistered fleet to attack 400,000 civilians, Vray said, her voice shaking with anger now instead of fear. That's not above my clearance. That's a massacre. That's survival, Kesh snapped, the smoothness cracking for just a moment. You don't understand what your ancestors barely stopped 200 years ago, Commander. You've read the sanitized version. I've read the real one. Humanity doesn't lose wars quietly. They lose, they hide, and they come back stronger and angrier than before. I am not going to let that happen again. Voss stepped toward the comm speaker, his jaw tight, his voice low and dangerous. You don't know us at all if you think hiding 400,000 people behind a lie makes you safe from what's coming. A pause. Ah, Kesh said softly. The ghosts are awake. Wonderful. That simplifies my targeting priorities considerably. The channel cut. Alarms blared through the last hope an instant later, and Echo's voice rose above them, sharp with urgency. Multiple Accord Black Ops vessels detected on intercept course. Weapons charging. They are targeting this ship directly. Of course they are, Voss muttered. He turned to his people, and Vray watched something transform in him. The tired, frost-covered soldier from a moment ago, hardening instantly into a commander with 200 years of stolen time to make up for. Full combat stations. Everyone who can stand, move. Echo, get this reactor to full power now. Compliance, Echo said. Warning. Full activation will draw significant attention. This vessel's weapon systems have not been tested in 2 centuries. Then we'll test them the hard way, Voss said grimly. Vray grabbed his arm before he could move past her. Captain, listen to me. That fleet outguns this ship badly, even at full power. I've seen Accord Black Ops configurations. You don't have the numbers. We've never had the numbers, Voss said, not unkindly, pulling free. That's not new information, Commander. It's just Tuesday. Despite everything, despite the fear knotting in her chest, something in his flat, exhausted confidence steadied her. She had spent her whole career serving an Accord that valued caution, procedure, overwhelming force before engagement. Voss's people clearly operated on a different principle entirely, one that didn't ask whether the fight was winnable, only whether it was necessary. The ship shuddered as the reactor climbed toward full power, lights brightening throughout every corridor, old systems groaning back to life after 200 years of silence. Vray felt the deck hum beneath her boots, a sensation like standing on the back of something enormous finally waking up. Commander, Echo said, addressing her directly now, your assistance would be valuable. You possess current tactical knowledge of Accord fleet capabilities that this crew lacks. Vray looked at Bex, Coral, and Iso, her own team, still standing uncertain near the chamber entrance. Helping Kesh's enemies wasn't just insubordination. It was treason, by any definition the Accord would recognize. Commander, Bex said quietly, whatever we do next, we should do it fast. She thought of Kesh's voice, calm and certain, ordering a massacre of 400,000 strangers as though it were routine paperwork. She thought of the sealed archives, the rewritten history, the small hidden door built to be overlooked. I'm in, she said. Bex, Coral, Iso, you don't have to follow me on this. It's not an order I can give in good conscience. All three exchanged a look. Iso spoke first, his claws tight around his sidearm. With respect, Commander, I'd rather stand against a lie than stand behind one. The others nodded, and something in Vray's chest loosened, just slightly, grateful in a way she didn't have time to fully feel. The battle began minutes later, and it was worse than Vray had feared. Kesh's fleet arrived in tight, disciplined formation, opening fire the moment the last hope came within range. The old warship rocked violently under the first volley, alarms screaming through every corridor, sparks raining from damaged conduits. Shields holding at 60%, Echo reported. Recommend evasive maneuvering. Do it, Voss barked, strapped into the command chair with the ease of someone who had sat there 1,000 times before, even if his body hadn't done so in 2 centuries. Around him, his crew moved with the same eerie, practiced calm, hands flying across old controls as if no time had passed at all. Vrey stood at a secondary station, feeding tactical data as fast as she could, translating Accord fleet patterns into something Voss's crew could use. Their lead ship is running an older aggression protocol, favors direct engagement over flanking. If you bait it forward, you can isolate it from the rest of the formation. Voss glanced at her, something like respect flickering behind the exhaustion in his eyes. Do it, he told his helmsman. The last hope lurched forward, old weapon systems finally roaring to life, and for the first time in 200 years humanity fired a shot in anger. It worked. The lead ship, baited into overextending, took the brunt of a devastating opening volley and spun away trailing fire and debris. Voss's crew let out a rough cheer, short-lived and grim, immediately swallowed by the next wave of incoming fire. Then a stray hit tore through a secondary corridor, and the ship screamed with the sound of tearing metal. Hull breach Deck 4, Echo reported. Casualties detected. One of Voss's soldiers, a young man barely older than a boy by the look of him, had been thrown from his station near the breach, shielding a wounded crewmate with his own body as the corridor decompressed around them. By the time emergency doors sealed and the pressure stabilized, it was too late for him. Voss didn't stop giving orders, didn't pause the fight. But Vrey saw his jaw tighten, saw something flicker behind his eyes that he refused to let reach the surface. A grief 200 years deep, finding one more name to carry. We don't have time to mourn him properly, Voss said quietly, almost to himself. We never do. That's the job. Vrey, standing beside him amid the chaos, understood in that moment exactly what kind of people had just woken up aboard this ship. Not conquerors, not monsters despite whatever fear had driven Kesh to hide them for 2 centuries. Just people who had learned over and over to keep fighting even when it cost them everything, because the alternative was losing everyone else. Commander? Echo's voice cut through the noise suddenly, oddly urgent, even by its own newly urgent standards. I have located something during the hull breach diagnostic. A registry plate, Deck 4, previously concealed behind damaged plating. Now is not the time, Voss snapped, still fighting the battle in front of him. I believe it is precisely the time, Echo said. The registry confirms this vessel's full designation and original mission parameters. Commander Sethis, Captain Voss, I do not believe this ship was ever meant to simply survive. On the main screen, amid the chaos of battle, an old fragment of text flickered into view, translated at last into words both of them could understand. Terran combat vessel. Last hope. Final directive. Complete the mission. Do not return until Earth stands free. Voss went very still, staring at the words as the ship shook around him. What mission? He said quietly. What mission did we never finish? Echo's answer came a moment later, and it changed everything Vrey thought she understood about the ship she was standing on. Insufficient data, Echo said. However, this vessel's original weapon configuration does not match a defensive warship. It matches a vessel designed for one specific purpose, to strike the heart of whoever destroyed Earth's defenses in the first place, wherever they were hiding. The reactor beneath their feet surged, and somewhere deep in the ship's ancient bones, systems no one aboard had ever seen before began, at last to wake. The ship groaned like something enormous stretching after 200 years of stillness. And deep in its hull, weapon systems no one aboard had ever seen before began sliding out of hidden housings, exposed to space for the first time in 2 centuries. Echo, Voss said carefully, watching the tactical display shift as new power readings bloomed across it. What exactly did we just wake up? Designated Deep Strike Array, Echo answered. Original function. To locate and neutralize the command infrastructure of any force responsible for a confirmed Homeworld-level attack. This vessel was never intended purely for defense, Captain. It was built to finish a war, not merely survive one. Vray stared at the readings, a cold understanding settling over her. That's why Kesh wanted this ship gone so badly. It's not just a symbol of what your people survived. It's a weapon aimed at whoever tried to erase you. Then let's see if it still works, Voss said grimly. The battle outside had not slowed. Kesh's remaining ships regrouped, pressing harder now, clearly aware that time favored the awakening giant beneath their fire more than it favored them. The last hope shuddered under another volley, alarms shrieking through corridors already scarred by the earlier breach. Shields at 30%, Echo reported. Deep strike array requires 90 seconds to fully charge. We don't have 90 seconds, Voss's second-in-command called from her station, voice tight. Vray's mind raced, old training and new desperation colliding. Captain, if I broadcast what we know, the sealed archives, the altered records, Kesh's Black Ops fleet attacking an undocumented civilian colony, on an open accord channel, it won't stop this fight. But it will make Kesh's authority a liability the moment other Accord officers hear it. He can't order a full cover-up if half the fleet is already listening. Voss studied her for a moment, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. Do it. Vray moved to the comm station, hands trembling slightly, and opened every frequency Echo could reach, from local tactical channels to wide accord relay bands normally reserved for high command. She had no rehearsed speech. Only the truth, spoken as plainly and quickly as she could manage while the ship rocked around her. This is Commander Vray Sethis, Threshold Accord, broadcasting on all available channels. High Magistrate Doran Kesh has deployed an unregistered fleet against an undocumented human civilian colony, in direct violation of Accord law. The historical record regarding the Terran species has been falsified. I have witness testimony and ship's records to prove it. Any officer receiving this transmission, I am requesting immediate independent verification and intervention. Silence answered her for several long, terrible seconds, filled only by the shriek of the battle outside. Then, faint and distant across the relay, other voices began responding, confused, alarmed, demanding confirmation, some already patching into wider command networks. It wasn't a rescue, not yet. But it was a crack, small and spreading, in the wall of silence that had protected Kesh for 2 centuries. On the bridge, Kesh's voice cut back into their local channel, sharp with fury for the first time. You foolish creature, do you have any idea what you've just done? I've told the truth, Vray said. Something you should have tried 200 years ago. The truth? Kesh's voice cracked with something that sounded almost like desperation now. The truth is that this species nearly ended us the first time, Commander. You weren't there. I was young, but I remember what they were becoming before the war ended. Relentless, adaptive, impossible to fully defeat, only delay. I did what was necessary to protect the galaxy from a threat that refused to stay buried. They're not a threat, Vray said. They're people. You didn't protect anyone. You just hid a crime for 200 years and called it wisdom. Kesh didn't respond. Instead, his remaining ships surged forward in one final, desperate push, weapons blazing, clearly intent on destroying the last hope before the deep strike array could finish charging and before Vray's broadcast could gather enough momentum to matter. Array at 70%, Echo reported. Recommend brace for impact. Incoming fire will breach forward shields within 30 seconds at current trajectory. Voss's jaw tightened. Options. None that guarantee survival, Echo admitted. However, a pause. The machine's now familiar hesitation before delivering something enormous. I have located Earth's true coordinates within my core memory, sealed under the same authorization that protected the cryochambers. I believe now is the appropriate time to disclose them. The bridge went quiet, even amid the chaos of battle. Earth wasn't destroyed, Echo continued. It was hidden, deliberately, by Terran command, in the final days of the war. Using technology this vessel was built to protect. A cloaking field, vast and old, designed to fold the entire system away from outside detection. The Accord's belief that Earth is an ash-covered ruin is not a lie born of ignorance. It is a lie humanity itself allowed to stand, to buy time, to recover in secret. Vray felt the shock of it land like a physical blow. You're saying Earth still exists, whole, alive. Confirmed, Echo said. And Magistrate Kesh's Black Ops Division has, as of 11 seconds ago, breached the outer edge of the cloaking field's coordinates. They found it first. On the tactical display, a new marker bloomed into existence. Not the ash-choked ruin every Accord record insisted on, but a green, living world, veiled until this exact moment by 2 centuries of careful secrecy, now suddenly, catastrophically exposed. Voss stared at the display for a long moment, and for the first time since waking, something raw broke through his controlled exterior. Home, he said quietly. It's still there. Yes, Echo said. And Kesh's fleet is already moving toward planetary defense grid coordinates, likely intending to disable what remains of Earth's automated defenses before word of this transmission can spread further. Voss closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. When he opened them, all the raw emotion had folded itself back down into something harder, sharper, ready to be used. Echo, divert every remaining reserve into that array right now, he said. I don't care if it burns out every system on this ship afterward. We are not losing Earth twice. Compliance, Echo said. Warning, this will leave the last hope with minimal remaining defenses following the strike. Noted, Voss said. Do it anyway. Vray watched him, watched the desperate, unshakable resolve settling over him and every soldier on that bridge, and understood, finally and completely, why an entire government had spent 2 centuries afraid of a species they believed was already dead. They had never stopped being willing to give everything for each other, and now they were about to prove it in front of the entire galaxy. The array's charge reached 90%, then 95%, the whole ship trembling with contained power like a held breath about to be released. Array charged, Echo announced. Awaiting your order, Captain. Voss looked once at Vray, once at the green living marker on the display that represented everything his people had sacrificed 200 years to protect, and gave the order that the last hope had been waiting 2 centuries to hear. Fire. The deep strike array fired once, and the light of it turned every screen on the bridge white for half a second. When the glare faded, Kesh's flagship was gone. Not damaged. Gone, along with 2 of the escort vessels flanking it, a precise, devastating strike that left the rest of his fleet scattering in confusion and disarray. The last hope rocked hard from the recoil of its own weapon, systems screaming warnings across every station, but it held together. Array systems offline, Echo reported, its voice strained in a way Vray had never heard from it before, almost human in its exhaustion. Remaining defensive capability minimal. Recommend immediate withdrawal or reinforcement. Reinforcements coming, Voss said, watching the tactical display where the scattered remnants of Kesh's fleet hesitated, no longer receiving orders from a commander who no longer existed. Or it better be, because we don't have another shot like that in us. Vray was already back at the comm station, watching new signals pour in across the relay she had opened minutes before. Accord command ships, alerted by her broadcast and now by the sudden, unmistakable destruction of an unregistered Black Ops fleet in restricted space, were finally moving, not to finish what Kesh started, but to demand answers. Multiple Accord command vessels inbound, she reported. They're hailing us. They want to know what happened here. Voss exhaled slowly, some of the tension easing from his shoulders, though his eyes never left the display, never stopped tracking every remaining threat. Then let's tell them the truth, all of it this time. The final hours that followed were not fought with weapons. Accord command vessels arrived to find a battered ancient warship and the scattered remains of a fleet that officially did not exist, hovering near a world every record insisted was a lifeless ruin. What they found instead, once the cloaking field Echo had helped stabilize finally lifted under careful, deliberate control, was Earth, green, alive, populated by millions who had spent 2 centuries rebuilding in secret, watching the stars, waiting. Vray stood beside Voss on an observation platform overlooking the planet as the first Accord diplomatic shuttles descended toward the surface, escorted by human vessels that rose to meet them. Not the crude, cobbled ships of desperate survivors, but disciplined, capable, quietly formidable. The product of 200 years spent preparing exactly for a moment like this one. You knew, Vray said quietly. All of you. You knew this day might come. We hoped it would, Voss said. Hope's a strange thing to build a species around, but it's what we had left. He glanced sideways at her. Couldn't have done it without an alien officer willing to risk everything on the word of a machine and a bunch of half-frozen soldiers. You didn't need me, Vray said. You would have found a way. Maybe, Voss allowed, but it would have cost more. It always does, going it alone. He looked back down at the planet, something soft finally allowed to surface in his weathered expression. Thank you, Commander, for believing us before you had proof. Vray thought of the soldier who had died protecting a wounded crewmate in the corridor breach. Of Echo's patient, careful honesty even when the truth implicated the very species it existed to protect. Of Voss giving the order to fire everything they had left to save a world he'd only just learned was still alive. You earned it, she said simply. Every part of it. In the days that followed, the truth spread through the threshold accord like wildfire, impossible to contain now that it had escaped into the open. Kesh's remaining Black Ops network unraveled quickly once investigators, no longer blocked by his authority, began pulling at the threads Vray's testimony and Echo's records provided. Officials who had quietly maintained the lie for decades found themselves facing tribunals they had never expected to answer to. The official Accord history of the Terran War, taught for 2 centuries as a tragic footnote, was formally rewritten. Not by decree this time, but by evidence too overwhelming to ignore. Vray herself paid a price for her choice. Reassigned, investigated, distrusted by colleagues who had built careers on the old version of events. But she found, standing on Earth's surface for the first time weeks later, breathing air that smelled nothing like the ash-choked ruin she had been taught to expect, that she did not regret a single moment of it. Voss found her there, near the edge of a rebuilt coastal city, humans moving busily around them in numbers that would have shocked every Accord analyst who had ever written humanity off as extinct. Figured I'd find you here, he said. Not exactly your homeworld. No, Vray agreed. But it's the first place I've stood where I didn't feel like the truth was something I had to fight for. It already won here. Voss nodded slowly, looking out over the rebuilt skyline, the ships lifting off in the distance. The quiet, hard-won ordinariness of a species simply being allowed to exist in the open again. The Accord's putting together some kind of formal delegation, he said. Official first contact, this time done right. They want representatives from the last hope there. Figured that includes you too, given everything. I'm not human, Vray pointed out. No, Voss agreed, the ghost of a smile touching the corner of his mouth for the first time since Vray had met him. But you stood with us when it counted, when you didn't have to, when it would have been easier not to. Where I come from, that earns you a seat at the table regardless of what species you were born into. Vray felt something unexpectedly warm settle in her chest, standing there on a planet that had spent 2 centuries as nothing more than a cautionary footnote. Now, finally, fully alive again in the eyes of the galaxy that had tried to forget it. Later, at the formal ceremony marking Earth's return to interstellar recognition, the last hope itself was given a new designation, its old scars left deliberately unrepaired, a visible reminder of exactly what it had survived to make this day possible. Officials from a dozen Accord member worlds stood in careful, respectful rows, watching as human representatives took their place among them for the first time in 2 centuries. Not as refugees begging for shelter, not as a rediscovered relic to be studied and pitied. As founders reclaiming a seat that had always, quietly, remained theirs. Echo's voice, patched into the ceremony's opening address at Voss's specific request, spoke one final line before falling silent, its long, solitary watch finally, truly over. Homeworld status, it said, warmth finding its way into that old, careful voice at last. Confirmed. Secure. Home. And across the crowd, human and alien alike, No one who heard it needed any translation at all to understand exactly what it meant.